Hey guys, it's Jessica from Peace Out Books, and today I'm here with a video chatting about 10 books I refuse to hear any criticism about. So I've seen this video floating around, I've seen a bunch of different people do it, and I was like, that sounds so much fun. So I'm gonna chat about 10 books where I absolutely love them, and I don't care what you think about them, I think they're perfect. They, to me, are just perfection. I love everything about them, especially if it's like the hero is like top tier amazing to me. I do not want to hear a single bad word about him. So I will go ahead and get to the books on this list. Some of them are all-time favorites, some of them are not all-time favorites by the author, but I'm aware my reading taste is not universal. Like, there are things I love that I know certain people hate. There's my favorite books that I know even my close friends hate, and that's okay. We can all have different reading tastes, but to me, these books are just like top tier. They are so good. So the first one, I would love to hear your guesses before we get started, but the first one of my favorite books of all time, my favorite in the series. Like, in this series, I can definitely see criticism. I know why people hate the first one. I admit, the first one's not perfect. It's totally fine. It's the first book. The second one, I love, but I can see people's criticism of it. This one, no. Ancient Lies by Gianna Darling. I know this series is not everyone's cup of tea, but this book, Gianna's writing just gets better and better with every single book she writes, and I feel like this one is really where it stood out, and it was just so poetic and beautiful. I have a copy. This is the special edition, I think, from Dark and Quirky. I do have a copy that I actually annotated and highlighted because it was just beautiful, and I'm obsessed with this book, and every time I read it, I've read it multiple times, and I don't reread books. And this one is a brother's best friend, but her and her brother grew up with his family, with Nova's family. He is older than her. He's part of the MC, and I loved Lila so much. He's a tattoo artist and tattoos on her, and every single moment in this book was pure magic, absolutely so romantic, but also a little bit kind of suspense stuff going on because of stuff with the MC, the motorcycle club, but this book is just literally my favorite, and you cannot tell me otherwise, and if you do, I will not listen because it's literally my favorite. So the next one is also one that really blew me away when I read it last year, and this is not my favorite book by this author, but it is the one I would recommend the most to read from her, because the other book is a duet, and I can see why it might not be for everybody because it has so many elements I love, but this one is just so well written. And that is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. Kennedy Ryan is an author that she just can do no wrong. Any book she writes, I am going to love. I don't think I've rated anything below a 4-star that I've read from her, and she throws so much emotion and passion into her romances, and you feel that especially in this one. This one is a second chance romance between a divorced couple. So they've already been married, they've already divorced, and they are just successfully co-parenting and running a business together. And then they start getting to the point where they don't really want each other to be with other people, and it just unravels so much about how they were feeling about each other because you learn things about them and why they got divorced and the feelings of both of them. I really don't want to spoil it. You really need to figure it out yourself, but also having the children involved too and who they blame for the divorce, how they were both affected by the divorce as well, and them seeing the repercussions of falling back in love and if they can do that. And it does discuss mental health and discusses therapy, especially for men, and the stigma behind that, and it was just so amazing. Her books always have so many layers to them, and I always am on the verge of tears and no matter what book I read from her. Like, I don't think she's ever written like a fun rom-com. Like, that is not what Kennedy Ryan writes. She writes things that will make you cry, and this one was just perfect. Everything about this was perfect. I loved it. That's all I can say. The next one is the only criticism I can take is because it just is too dark for people. That's the only criticism I will take because this book ripped my heart out, and I still haven't reread it because I don't know how I want to experience these emotions again, and that is Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. This book, I know so many people read and they love it, and the only thing that I can say I will accept criticism on is that it's very graphic in the beginning and it's very dark, and it might be too dark for some readers, but the way these characters went through what they did, they're kidnapped together, they really don't like each other, it is her sister's fiance, they always butt heads, and they're kidnapped together by someone who loves making the people he kills fall in love with each other before he kills them, and killing them in front of each other to make them suffer even more. So he forces them to do things together, and they are being very intimate together and surviving something horrific and tragic together and start to develop feelings. And they obviously get out, they escape, but now they're having to go back to the real world, having that experience with each other and only knowing the other person has experienced that. So they try to integrate back into society, get back to everyday life, but they're like, no one understands what I went through, and people are getting annoyed with them for not being able to get over it fast enough because no one understands what happened. And so they fall in love. And I need to reread this. I think I read it in January of 2022 and I was never the same. And so the way Jennifer Hartman just like, she did that with this book. And I have not read anything with this premise, anything similar to this. The only thing that I can think of is kind of similar is Tilly Cole's Hades Hangman series. Is Tilly Cole's Hades Hangman series the most recent book I read, which was it Heart Recaptured? I don't remember. The one about like they were captured together with the cult. It's the only one that like kind of comes close, but not really. So nothing else is like this. Nothing hits my emotions like this. And I love a romance where it's their siblings' significant other. It's messed up, but it's angsty and dramatic and I love it. So this one's amazing. The next one is one I had definitely had criticism on while I was reading it. But it's once you get to the end where you're just like, oh my god, like this was a masterpiece. And that is Manacled. I read this in 48 hours, not even 48 hours, less than 48 hours, because I started at like noon and I finished probably 10:30 on Sunday. I spent the entire weekend reading this 1,000-page book. And if you saw my Instagram reel, I sobbed. I have a reading vlog of this where I literally could not talk about this book without wanting to cry. I saw a TikTok about it 2 days later, literally almost started crying over my breakfast. This book is very long. It's over 1,000 pages. It is not professionally edited from what I know of. It's fan fiction. It's Hermione fan fiction. But every little detail, I don't know how this author wrote it. Like every little detail had a purpose. Every scene had a purpose. Every scene and drawn out plot led to the last page of this book. That completely wrecked me. I think that everything tied up together amazingly. Like it's written where it's the present day and then we get a 40% chunk of the past and then we're taken back to the present day. And it's basically a Handmaid's Tale situation as if the Order did lose the war in Harry Potter. So this is just very dark, and I got a lot of people giving their 2 cents about the book on when I posted about it, and someone said that the author does not intend this to be a romance, it's a tragedy. It's still romance to me. I mean, like, they end up together. I will tell you that. They do end up together, but it's very tragic and very dark and breaks your heart. But the way Malfoy was created into like the ultimate hero to me, even though he literally is a mass murderer, it was amazing. And I feel like you don't understand unless you've read it, because I've seen people hyping Manacled here on YouTube and my friends have for like 2 years now, and I'm like, okay, sure. Like, yeah, sure, you love it, okay. There's no going back. So I am very excited to read more fanfic, but this one will be forever perfect for me. Even though like I acknowledge there are parts that were imperfect, they were there for a reason. So you can't argue that it's not perfect. So I actually have 2 books of the same name. And one of them I feel like gets way more criticism, and I'm not going to accept that because this book is perfect for me, and that is Forget Me Not by QB Tyler. This book made me fall in love with QB Tyler. Like, I'm obsessed with her now and everything she writes, and I've read it multiple times. I've tabbed it, I highlighted it. This one's Marriage in Trouble, Second Chance. If you don't know, Second Chance literally is my favorite romance ever trope because of the angst behind it and just so much emotion. So this one I loved. I listened to an audio the first time, reread it physically, and highlighted it, and I actually highlighted a copy to send to the author because I was like, you need to know. Like, and I annotated her copy. I didn't annotate this one. But this one, her husband cheated on her. And people don't like cheating. And I'm fine with cheating. He makes up for it because he cheats on her. They're on the brink of divorce, and then he gets amnesia, which is my other favorite trope. I need more amnesia romances in my life. And he is in a car accident, gets amnesia. She shows up because she's still like his emergency contact, and she's like, let's get home. And he's like, babe, why don't you kiss me? Like, hello. And she's like, what? And he does not remember ever breaking up with her. He does not remember cheating on her. He does not remember any of the hardships they went through in their marriage that led to all of that happening. And so he is just like so upset with himself and so determined to win her back. There are parts where people get upset with him. Listen, people are people. People are not perfect, and he is not perfect, and I loved him. And I loved this romance. I loved it so much. I loved everything about it. Everything it made me feel, all the drama and the angst, and it was perfect to me. And I will not hear your criticism about that book. The other one is Forget Me Not by Julie Soto, who actually writes fan fiction. She wrote The Auction and The Right Thing to Do, and I'm gonna go read those because I'm obsessed with this. This is Second Chance. This hero is like literally perfection. This book, Teddy Hamilton narrates it, and they are wedding planners. And this one also does a trope I don't like, or like plot structure I don't like, that I loved in this book. So it flashes back between the past and the present. The past from only his perspective, falling in love with her as they work on weddings together. His dad's a florist. She is working under a really famous wedding planner. And then to the future, where she has her own wedding planning business and company, and he is running the florist shop now. We know that they broke up and they have not spoken in years, and they do not want to speak. Like, the amount of anxiety she gets being around him because of the way they broke up. And she has a really high A-list client, and they want him to work on their wedding, so she has no choice. So we get the past from him falling in love, and we know they broke up, but we don't know why. I hate that, because I've read so many books where the final reveal is always so disappointing to me. I'm like, that's really why you broke up, or like, that's the secret that's been hidden from us. Like, I hate it when the readers don't know and it's revealed at the end. I'm always disappointed. I loved it in here because it was just so heartbreaking. You're like, oh my god, that's why they broke up, and I loved it. I loved it. I loved the ending scene. I loved everything about how he's always there for her. He literally loves her. He's covered in flower tattoos because he's a florist, and I'm obsessed. This book was amazing. I will not hear criticism. So the next one, I was just looking through my shelves, and I was like, what else would I ever include in this book? And I was like, if anybody talks bad about this book, I'm coming for you. Because the rest of the story by Tal Bauer is a book that made me cry, and these are my babies, and no one can talk badly about them. Every single character in this book I loved, which is saying something, because, well, okay, not like the bad characters, but like all the side characters that are like good people. So this guy is a professional hockey player, and he gets called to this team that's pretty much a death sentence to anybody's career. They're the worst in the league. Anybody who goes there never plays again once they leave that team. So he's like, oh my god, like, what is happening to my career? He gets on the team and he notices things are off. And he helps these guys come out of a really devastating situation and rebuild the team. And he is falling in love with one of the rookies on the team, who is older because he went to college and now he's playing professionally, and he is kind of like the ringleader of the rookies, and this guy is being named captain of the team. And they're falling in love while trying to rebuild this team, and it's so found family, so underdog, wanting them to win, and so precious. Like, everything about this book was so precious, and the romance is very slow burn because the one hero doesn't want to get attached and the other one does, and they obviously fall in love, and it's just like, I want to hug them. Like, this book I want to hug and never let go because they're so precious. So that's all I can say. The next one's because of the hero, and because I'm obsessed with him, and I will not hear anything bad about him, and that is In the Weeds by B.K. Borison. This book is just so precious. Like, the vibes I get reading this book make me feel so happy and cozy, and again, like, I just want to hug these characters because Beckett is perfect. He's grumpy. He lives in a small town, and he really doesn't like people, and he's very sensitive to certain things, and he just likes to be alone. He likes to be alone on his farm. And the heroine kind of just like crashes into his life. She's a social media influencer from book 1, and this one, because this is book 2 in the Love Life Farm series, and she wants to stay at the last place that made her happy because she's really lost her way, and she doesn't really know who she is with social media and her job and like what she's doing. So she goes back to the town, and the town is very, very small town. They finagle it so that she has to stay with him. They're like, there's nowhere in town to stay, you gotta stay in Beckett's spare room. So she stays with him, and it is perfection. It is so sweet, and I'm just like thinking of these books of the feeling they gave me, and I'm just like, I love these people so much, and I'm obsessed with them, and you can't say otherwise. So the next one is one of my favorite authors. It's not my favorite book by her, but it's close, and this one I know is a fan favorite, and I think that the lead up to this book was amazing, and these characters are so broken and need each other so much that I'm just like, it literally was perfection. That's Fracture Sky by Catherine Cowles. This is finally Shiloh's story. So this whole premise of the series is that in book 1, the daughter of this family is kidnapped for days by a guy who basically has like a cult-like family. They're pretty much like doomsdayers, like they can't trust anybody. Very strict like gender roles. They're very abusive. So the heroine of book 1, it was her dad that kidnapped Shiloh, and she ends up falling in love with Shiloh's brother, but like he hates her and like everything that they caused their family to go through. So the mom's very overprotective, which affects like the sister's story because no one lets her do things that she wants to do because like her sister was kidnapped, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, like freak out, overprotective now moving forward. So the whole family's very scarred by the situation. But Shiloh has really withdrawn from everybody since a child. Like she is very much affected by being kidnapped as a child. And so she finds peace going to Ramsay's farm and watching him. He is very closed off as well because of something that happened in his past. And he's like very grumpy and doesn't let anybody around. He helps rehabilitate damaged horses, scarred horses. So that's what he does, and she always comes by and watches, and she confides in him that she really needs to get away from her mom. She's like very suffocated by her family, and he's like, why don't you stay on my property? And so she does, and it is so good. It is so good, so emotional and amazing, and I love two broken characters, and authors always save the best couple for last. I feel like the couple you are just dying to get their story, saving it for last, and this one I loved. Two broken people falling in love, and it was amazing. The last one is because every time I think about this book and every time I see a TikTok or a reel, I'm like, I want to reread this so badly because I was obsessed, and it's been a long time since I was that obsessed when I read this book, and that is going to be Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. And I get annoyed when people complain about this book because I'm like, this book was so good. Every time I see these things about it, I'm like, oh my god, like I didn't realize that. And I realize new things every time I see people post about it. And it's a fantasy romance. I loved the romance part. I am a fantasy romance reader. I love the romance, and I feel like a lot of criticism also comes with people who aren't necessarily romance readers and they just like fantasy. I loved this. And listen, nothing has to be perfect, okay? So when people are like, well, why would they want to kill off so many people when they're like training people to ride? Because they do. The stakes have to be high, and I love when people die in books. I know that sounds bad, but like, where are the stakes? Like, people die from page like 10, and I'm just like, dang, like you are really pulling the stakes out, and I love that. It gets so just immersive and like real, and you can't stop reading, and I could not stop reading this, and I loved, loved, loved the romance. I don't care that it was obvious that who her romance was gonna be with, like that's what every romance is. I love it, and I can't wait to read the second one to see the secrets that they were hiding, and there's dragons, and there's like secrets about the dragons, and I loved it. So maybe I'm easy to please, but this book was amazing. And those are 10 books I will hear no criticism about. Let me know what your books are that you think are just perfection to you and you will not hear anybody talk about them poorly, and what you thought of the books that I talked about, but like only the positive things. That's all I have. As always, thank you so much for watching, and have a good day. Bye.